Hi there, I'm Aaron Wilder, and I curated the Amos Eno Gallery exhibition, Unstable Language, on Artsy. And with me now is Nasrah Omar, one of the artists in the show. Nasrah, thanks so much for spending time to speak with me.
Thank you so much. I'm genuinely excited.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about unstable language, the theme of the show. Are there any particular ideas that that brings up for you?
I guess in my practice and just in my lived experience, I often think about the instability of language and the way it's communicated and distilled. And also, I guess,
And
just in
twisted.
our, yes, especially in our present condition, how, as you know, language is weaponized and used to both, I guess, obscure violence and also manufacture consent for it. And I think we're seeing that unfold in real time, especially when we think about, our media landscape and how
Absolutely.
language is being used to dehumanize. I'm thinking specifically about the Palestinian struggle, but also in so many instances alongside to erase and even
And gaslight for sure.
yes, yes. And even just, growing just in my childhood and post 9/11 America, just thinking about, when acts of violence are perpetrated, who gets to be worded terrorist and
Right.
who's alienated lone wolves. So there's a lot of
Right.
ideology always underpinning the choice of words. And I think as artists, we're always finding ways of destabilizing. So that's also something to contend with.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's the instability of language and how it's used in media and politics, and then there's the intentional destabilization of language as an artistic
Yes.
strategy. So there's sort of like a reclamation of destabilization in a way, or re-destabilizing to undest. I don't know.
Yes.
This piece, Between the Worlds, is a really enigmatic piece, and it toward the top, it looks very firm and solid, and then as your eye moves down, it becomes this optical illusion of this almost fabric melting away. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so at the very heart of the image, the figure you see with the rupture is a Garuda, which is, a being associated with shape shifting and also protection and rebirth. And and this is across both South Asia and East Asia and various cosmologies. And it's also a figure associated with journeys and being a conduit for journeys. So in this particular work, I was really thinking about it as a proxy figure as well for the diasporic self. And then all the layers, the wounding opens up, and what's revealed inside that you can see there's an overlay,
Mhm.
and the fractal image you see is actually Rangoli, which is a communal ritual, and it's usually drawn by hand with families as an auspicious tradition on Hindu festivals in India. And it's always the Rangoli is always placed at thresholds to invite protection and blessing. And I was also thinking, just in my experiences encountering fractals, you'll see a lot of syncretic threads in my work. And so I was also thinking about Islamic art and architecture, and there's always a recurring use of geometrical patterns that repeat ad infinitum, and it's to honor the divine, but also thinking about how that repetition can induce a liminal state, but
Mhm.
there's still an unboundedness. And yeah, I was thinking with this work specifically, Between the Worlds, about all the inherited knowledge that exists within that constitutes our being, and sometimes we may not have conscious access to it. And I just thought it would be interesting to approach this figure without with a face, but to refuse the idea of identity as something fixed. It's quite malleable. The action is
Mhm.
unfolding in the frame.
Yeah,
Yeah, this
sort of, there's a fluidity.
yeah. I was just thinking of also the self as always, in flux as we're always regenerating through rupturing.
Hmm.
just in our lives. Yeah.
Right, and that kind of movement, you're talking about rupture, movement that it can either cause rupture or movement because of rupture. Let's talk about your other work in the show, Migration Repository. I keep wanting to lay this down on the floor because of the perception of gravity and wanting to put things in the different compartments. Could you talk a little bit about this piece and some of the symbolism in it?
That's really curious that you say that because, and it's the reversed side of the carom board and it's always laid horizontally. So that's really curious. And I've just kind of made it a vertical repository, but it is always, you will always encounter it as a horizontal surface. So that's really, really interesting. Yeah, and then this is actually the reverse side of a carom board game, which is something I grew up with, and I feel a lot of fellow South Asians have as well. It's just a staple in, family life and at community spaces. And a lot of these boards are often passed down intergenerationally. But yeah, just turning the board, which is a surface that we never really pay attention to. It has lattice work
Uh-huh.
of plywood to support the board, and that's what you're seeing, the intersecting plywood with the 36 columns. And I don't know, I was just really intrigued by the reverse backing, all the parts that hold the game together, but they're kind of invisible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just thinking about, oh wow, this is such an apt tool at thinking about unseen and invisible labor and histories. And yeah, I feel it kind of lent itself to this type of experimentation. And so each pocket that you see holds some memento from my own journey. But, as you've mentioned, obviously there's very distinct omissions too. And that's definitely very deliberate because I want the viewer to use their own imagination. And I definitely think of it as a communal repository, even though frame is fixed as a still image. But it's definitely an invitation to the viewer to think about which objects tethered to their memories of journeying they would place inside, and just thinking of the diasporic body to navigating, grid systems.
Yeah, it's a lovely gesture to invite someone to contribute so that you have your own mementos from journeying and then they add to it. So that's really lovely. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Nasra, for taking the time to speak with me. And I want to let everyone know that Unstable Language is on artsy.net through December 1st. Thank you.
So much. This is great.